Hey everyone, welcome to The Path of Me. I'm your host, Wendy Hutchinson. My guest today is the lovely Wendy Battles. She's a cybersecurity awareness expert at Yale University by day, and she also pursues her passion celebrating, illuminating, and elevating older women, which I love, by night. As the host of Reinvention Rebels podcast, Wendy interviews bold and unapologetic women 50 to 90 years young. I love that you put 50 to 90 years young, who have reinvented themselves later in life to see new possibilities. So welcome, Wendy. Thanks so much for saying yes to the show.
Wendy, thank you. First of all, anyone named Wendy, I will be on the show.
Thank you. Awesome. I was very excited when we connected, and I knew for sure I would never forget your name, which is huge.
Right? I love it, especially at this age, right?
Yes. Yes. And we're the same age. We just realized we're the same age. And so we're kind of in the same stage of life. And my first question to you is, have you always been passionate about living out loud and finding your joy and living your truth? Or was this something that you came to through your journey in life?
I would say that I've always been an incredibly optimistic, can-do, see the glass as half full person. I've always been a joyful person. I can't say, however, that I've always been living on purpose. And I will say that through every decade of my life, starting in my 30s, I was on a quest to figure out, what am I meant to do? That was my big question. And I remember, Wendy, that I was 32. I just had some surgery. So I was out of work for 6 weeks. And I remember in my little apartment, I'd written up like all these things I could possibly do. Because I was like, I've got to find out what I'm meant to do. And
what's that thing, right? What's that
thing? And I will say that I've always been successful in my jobs. I've always been very successful professionally. But at the same time, I always felt like I was meant to do something else. And I spent my 30s, my 40s, my 50s trying to figure out, what is that thing? So it wasn't that I was unhappy or had some terrible job, but I also felt like there was more joy to be had. There was joy, but there wasn't like the kind of joy.
Next level.
Right. Next level. I was missing next level joy, Wendy. And I was really searching. And in my 40s, in my 30s, when I was searching, because I remember I wrote down that my mission was to speak, teach, motivate, and inspire.
I love it.
Speak, teach, motivate, and inspire. And really interestingly, everything I've done really has, even though I couldn't see it at the time, really falls under that umbrella. But in my 30s, I started doing voiceovers. And I thought maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. But I found it really hard, and I didn't try that hard. And I kind of gave up easily, because you have to have a thick skin to do that and get a lot of rejection, just like being an actor.
Right.
So in my 40s, I was again at one of those inflection points. My dad had passed away. So this was now in 2005. I'd gone to a career coach. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to figure out my bigger mission. And at the time, I was working in this job, in a corporate job, which I'm not a corporate person at all. I'm much more of a laid back, free spirit kind of a person. Go to this career coach. And I got onto the idea of public health, that I love this idea of being of service to others. I'm interested in, in like the Black community, there's so many chronic health problems. I was really interested in that.
Right.
But what I decided, though, is that to go to school full time in public health, I'd have to quit my job. And in my 40s, I was like, that seems so impractical.
Right.
No. Or I could do, there's some programs that were part-time, but then I thought it'll take forever. That didn't seem like a good idea either. So I got onto the idea of nutrition, because I've always been interested in nutrition. I had spent time going to nutritionists for different conditions. So I ended up going and getting this certificate at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and I became a health coach. And I thought, I think this is it. And I quit my job. But I'm going to tell you, Wendy, sometimes we do things and it doesn't lead us to that thing.
Right.
Sometimes it's a detour or a roadblock, and we have to figure out how to get around it. I realized that I like to coach people, but I didn't love coaching. And mostly I didn't love all the stuff you have to do to run a business. I was not prepared for that at all. I could quit my corporate job. I was like, oh, it'll all work out. And that's really not a good strategy. So so I ultimately realized after doing it for a couple of years full time, where I really never did anything but break even. And then I started doing it part time, which was much better. And I got a part time job, so that kind of eased the pressure. But I just thought that this still wasn't it. So
There
then
was a missing piece somewhere.
yeah, there was a missing piece somewhere, and I ended up going from working part time at Yale to full time in information security. And that was a really good move, just to be much more stable, to do something I really enjoy, to use again my skills, speak, teach, motivate, inspire, because I worked in organizational change management. I was like a translator for technical projects. I'm not a technical person, but I can communicate about a project in a way people can understand.
Right.
So I did that for quite some time. And in 2019, it was one of those moments. I was like, Wendy, you have got to figure out what you're meant to do. You're now in your 50s. Like time is passing by. And I still felt like something is missing. So it actually happened because we have a lot of affinity groups at the university. One of them is the Future Leaders of Yale. They asked me to be part of a panel about personal branding. I said, sure. But then I thought, what do I know about personal branding? I'll figure it out kind of person. Anyway, Wendy, I started listening to podcasts about personal branding. I came across a podcast called Package Your Genius. Just the name itself sounds like, what? That sounds so interesting. This woman, Amanda Miller Littlejohn, has this podcast, and it's all about figuring out what is that thing that you do that no one else can do the way that you do, where you shine. I listened to the podcast, then I got her book, and I started doing all the exercises in her book. And I was like, I just feel like there's something else I meant to do.
Package your genius.
Package your genius. It's just like, and the book was like, I don't know, $20 and totally worth it. It was so fabulous. So in doing these exercises, I started to hone in on like, what do I love? I love working with women when I was a health coach. Like I was passionate about working with women and helping them feel their best. So I knew that was a thread. I was thinking, well, I'm 50 something and I see how older women are portrayed in the media and in society. And I don't really like that. And I thought, well, what if I could do something that could empower women in midlife and beyond? So I just started writing ideas down just randomly. I started being much more quiet, cooking in silence, doing the dishes in silence. And, a lot of wisdom just really bubbled up.
Yeah, that's where the answers come, is when you create silence, right? So you can feel your truth coming forward.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And literally one day I was meditating and I heard in a like tiny whisper, Reinvention Rebels. I was like, what? Reinvention Rebels. And I thought, what is that? Like, I had no idea. And what's funny, Wendy, is that I listened to a lot of podcasts and I love podcasts, but I remember even distinctly saying, I love podcasts, but I could never be a podcast host. I don't even know why I thought that, considering I do a lot of speaking.
Right.
I don't know why I would think that.
You really have an inquisitive mind and communication skills. So I think you have the right tools for it. But that must have sparked something, because here you are.
Here I am. And so literally I just leaned into, something told me, write down Reinvention Rebels. Sometimes you get an idea and you're like, I should write that down, or it's in the middle of the night and you're like, I'm going to remember it. But of course in the morning, you're like, I don't know what I was thinking about. I have no clue.
Right.
I just wrote it down and I just noodled on it. And it just came to me over time. It was like a podcast. And
love it.
And I have to say, Wendy, that this is the greatest joy of my life, doing this podcast. It is what I'm meant to do. It is That
I-
joy that I was missing all those years, this is it.
Isn't it great? Isn't it great just sharing people's stories and connecting with people? And I mean, my guests I found have all taught me something and inspired me just with their courage or their story or their passion. You know, there's so many people, and I think it's important for us to share people's stories because other people will relate to them and also realize you don't have to hold yourself to the standard of being Oprah or
Yeah.
some superstar to create impact or to live your best life. We all have the tools, right? We all have the
Oh,
knowing, we
yes.
all have the spark inside of us to create our best life, whatever that looks like. And so I love that you're showcasing women who are in, a different demographic. They're mature, they've had life experience behind them. And I think that has given them courage to kind of step in and come forward into their purpose or their passion or both, right?
Yes, it's so true. And I think you're right, both, often both. And, or one fuels the other. It might start with the passion, becomes the purpose, or vice versa. And it is inspiring, one, to listen to their stories, these stories of these women that have done such interesting, juicy, living on purpose things, but also to hear the reaction of other women that are listening and seeing what it looks like when someone listens and gets inspired and takes action and finds their purpose. And that really was my purpose in doing this, was to inspire other women about what was possible. And so I will tell you this, I was in the grocery store a few weeks ago and going to the grocery store on a Saturday in like my jeans, no makeup on.
Right.
And this woman, I kept seeing this woman who was smiling at me, this African-American woman, she was smiling at me. She had a mask on. And so then I saw her again. She's like, are you Wendy?
What? She recognized you from your podcast? That is so cool. Oh,
it's so funny because she told me on LinkedIn that because of listening to the podcast, she'd gotten inspired by someone who became a yoga instructor, like in her 60s. And she got really inspired by that. So she said she listened to that episode and then she ended up she got motivated and inspired, became a yoga instructor. So now we're in the store. She's telling me this story. And she's like, well, I mean, she's like, I am so enamored with what you do. And I was afraid to like approach you. I was like, it's just me. She's like, but you're like famous. I'm like, well, first of all, I'm not famous. And I'm just Wendy.
You're being recognized in the grocery store.
Which seems crazy. Like I'm thinking all I'm doing is just living on purpose though, and doing what I love.
Yeah, I love
and
it.
I think that when we find that thing, whatever that thing is that we love, that brings us so much joy, we can't help but draw other people in to feel that same kind of joy and inspiration.
Right. That's so beautiful. That must have felt so good.
I was so
to have that
touched.
human connection. I mean, it's great when people comment or they interact that way, but to have somebody actually stop you in the grocery store and have a conversation, that must have
That was awesome.
Heart. Like, oh my God, somebody is out there really being touched by my work,
Yeah. It was really, really special. And it's funny because another mutual friend of ours had said to me a while back, Cheryl would be a great guest. I said, oh, she would. I always have this long list of people that want to be on. And, because I do it and I have a full-time job, it always takes me a while to
get that person's schedule.
Right. Yeah. Get to all these people. And I just made a mental note. So I ran into her. I was like, oh my gosh, Erica said you have to connect with Cheryl. And there it was. So it is funny how things unfold.
I also noticed too, that when you kind of step into your lane and you lock in to your thing, to doing the thing, opportunities, it's like the universe just starts delivering all the right people and resources and opportunities, and you just are like, this is really amazing,
Absolutely.
and you're just shocked by it. But I really feel like when you're aligned in what you're doing and you're really making choices that foster that passion or purpose or both, your alignment, because I'm all about energy, your energy is just attracting it all to you. And
Wendy, you are so right.
also, I think it's also pushing your voice and your show and your work out into the world, and it's reaching people that you don't even realize you're reaching.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think we sometimes don't know the impact. I know sometimes I think especially as women, we can make ourselves smaller than we need to and think maybe we're not having that impact. But to your point, we never know what that impact can be. And it's hearing these stories we hear from listeners or people that stop us that tell us these stories that remind us. Because, sometimes we can have a day when you're like, I don't know, like, we can be filled with doubt some days or unsure. And it is those moments that I think are so important that reinforce for us, okay, even though it doesn't always feel like it.
Yeah, well, it makes you realize that what you're doing matters.
Yes.
You're literally changing somebody's life. You
Yeah.
really are.
And I
And
think that's,
I think we have these opportunities like this woman stopping you in the store that just gives you that little pat on the back, that little nod, right? That you're on track and you need to keep
yes.
going, because there's times, I know for me, there have been times when I'm like, is anybody listening? Is anyone even listening? Because I think a lot of people do, but they don't necessarily comment or reach out, or,
Exactly.
you might get a
Exactly.
like or something on Facebook.
Yeah.
But
But
I
it's
think people
true.
really are. The right people find you. The
The
right
right,
people
yeah. And I
know.
think that's right. The right people do find us. I do want to mention something too. You had talked about how when you start to put the energy out there, things just naturally come to you and things open up when you have that intention. And one of the things that happened for me is that for the longest time, like so many other people, for the longest time, it has been on my vision board, on my bucket list to do a TED Talk.
Are you
Right?
doing that? Did you get
Yeah,
an opportunity?
I will. And I want to tell you how this unfolded because it's so interesting that I've been saying I want to do a TED Talk. One day I'm going to do a TED Talk. So someone reached out to me on LinkedIn because I'm very involved with at Yale. We have a Toastmasters club.
Great.
And, right, we do all this public speaking. So someone reached out to me or connected me with this person who was organizing a TEDx event in New Haven, where I live.
Okay.
I didn't even know that they were doing a TEDx.
Right.
So he reached out. He said, "Oh, Wendy, I'd love to meet with you. Would you be interested in being involved?" And so we met. I said, "Oh, great. Can I do a talk?"
I love that
And
you were bold. You just
oh,
put it
yeah.
out.
Right. And because he said there's one coming up in June. Now, this was probably in March. And he said, "I'm so sorry, but we already have all the speakers lined up. We've been working on this for quite some time. However," he said, "one, I wanted to see if you would be interested in being an MC for the event."
Cool.
Right? Because it's at the Schubert, which is our big theater in New Haven, where, all the Broadway,
Sure.
shows come, et cetera. And he said, and in December, we're doing TEDx Women in New Haven.
Oh my gosh. This
I was
is
like,
so exciting. Oh my God. Congratulations. I'm so excited for you.
so he said, "Would you like to be part of that?" I said, "Of course." Like and so it's
You're like, let me
interesting,
calendar that right in right now.
right? And I thought it was interesting for a couple of reasons. One, the opportunity to do one that's just focused on women when I'm all about women is so ideal. But I think even better than that was by volunteering my time to be of service to other people, to be able to really set the stage for them and introduce them.
Yeah.
One, it was just a great thing to do because everyone works so hard on their talks and preparing for their talks, and it's such a big deal.
Right.
But I had the added benefit of actually getting to feel what it feels like to be on the stage.
Yes. Yes.
And because,
Totally.
I could see how nervous everybody was.
Sure.
And I know I will feel the same way, but it demystified it. It made me feel better. It's like I could feel like what it feels like to own the stage.
I love it for you. I love that for you.
And
So exciting.
so I think that that idea of getting into the flow of being intentional about whatever it is we want to attract and keeping focused on that and also appreciating that things can happen, that we can achieve that thing, but maybe it happens differently than what we think or what we're expecting, as in this case,
Often the unfolding,
the
it's going
unfolding.
to be a surprise, and we have to surrender our ego that wants to know how it's going to unfold, in what order, when. We're kind
Yes.
of raised in a very linear um, mindset, right? But things
Yeah.
are changing. So I'm all about energy, right? And so I feel like when we can surrender and really just allow everything to kind of come together on its own, it's going to come in perfect timing, just like this opportunity for you, right? Like you couldn't have planned that.
No.
That had to kind of, you had to kind of put it out there and then surrender and be like, I am going to give a TEDx talk, or I am going to be part of this at some point. And boom, there you are.
Right.
I think it's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm excited. And it's interesting because, to your point, you mentioned earlier about getting quiet and how things then can just, we create the space for things to come to us, what's already inside.
Yes.
I noticed that after that I was done with the emceeing for the next like week, all of a sudden I just immediately had all these ideas about my talk that just flowed to me so easily, like how I'm going to start it and like what I'm going to say. And it just, because I had gone to, someone had given a webinar about doing a TED talk or a TEDx talk. And, she's a coach that coaches people. There's all these people that like all they do is coach people about doing a TED talk. And it was but it was so instructive though, just this 1 hour about like how to prepare and some key things to think about. And I thought, all those things again are just aligning, that I would first even see the email or see her post on social media on Instagram, to go and register for this thing, to then go and listen, to take all these notes, and then to be able to go back to these notes as I started to think about my TED talk. And I was like, it's funny how things
All
unfold.
the pieces start to come together, right?
Yeah.
Which is incredible. I think following our own compass requires us to have faith in ourselves, because for many of us, our whole lives, we have been discouraged from having faith in ourselves. And we've been told that we have to trust the opinion of everyone else around us. And a lot of people don't see or have the vision we have for us.
Yeah.
People have their own vision for you of what you should do or who you should be or how you should act. And they want to put you in these boxes that we don't belong in. And so a big part of stepping into your light is really walking away from all of that noise and really following your heart and listening to yourself and guiding yourself forward, because only you know what's right for you, honestly. And you have to silence all the critics, and you have to silence all of those people who are uncomfortable with you breaking barriers and going further and creating these dreams for yourself,
I do. I totally agree. It's about faith and trusting yourself.
Mhm.
And you're right, ignoring the naysayers and people that tell you you can't or why would you do that. And I know that one of my guests who I had on last season or season 2, Lori, she in her at 50 moved from Philadelphia, gave up her tenure track academic job at Temple University to move to Spain. And all these people were like, well, why would you want to do that? You have a good job. Why do you think that's a good idea? Like, people work for years to get tenure. Why would you give it all up?
Right.
And they couldn't understand that she and her husband and her kids had made a decision that was right for them. And I thought what was interesting is that she said she just tuned out. She started tuning out what people were saying,
Mhm.
didn't listen to the naysayers, and only listened to positive messages about what you can do, what's possible. She listened to podcasts, she read things, she really focused on that energy.
Mhm.
Because, moving to another country, it's a big deal. There's a
Yeah.
ton of stuff you have to do. And she said that she and her husband made a list of every single thing. Like they made a list of every single thing they could think of they had to do. And then just like ordered them and like, okay, well, first we have to do this to be able to do this. And then we can do that. But that's how they sort of stayed on track with like this very narrow focus on only positive messages from positive people that believe in what we're doing and, to stay on track. So I think you were so right about that. That does make a big difference.
I think it's really important in life that we surround ourselves with people who are for us,
Absolutely.
because they are our people,
Yeah.
right? I think a lot of people hold on to people who are feel kind of heavy, like the relationship feels heavy, like they kind of want to tether you and pull you back and pull you down, as you're trying to rise. They're going to plant seeds of doubt or project their fears on you or whatever it is. And I think what your guest did is so perfectly to my point that we need to be really careful about what we invite into our field, our circle. We need to make sure that we're encouraged and loved and supported by the people that we invite into our lives.
It makes such a huge difference. And life is so complicated, especially these days on multiple levels. And you name it, it's complicated.
Yeah. So were they
So
able to move
yeah,
successfully and enjoy this incredible life over there? Or-
yeah, they moved successfully and her kids, one of her three kids was already like graduated out of high school and was staying behind, but her two younger ones, I think her daughter's maybe in middle school and her son's in high school. That's a big transition.
yeah.
They her husband is Spanish, but they, and they knew some Spanish, but it wasn't like a native Spanish speaker. So now they're moving and her daughter's taking all of her classes in Spanish.
Oh my gosh.
And but they just did it. Like it was like a huge transition, but they were like they've done it.
I think that's why your show's important because you're teaching us how to be fearless with your guests.
Yeah.
You're showing us that it's possible. If you don't have examples of what's possible, you don't even know it's possible, right? They say
Right.
you don't know what you don't know. So being introduced to the idea that you can have a dream and then bring that to life is really important for people, especially right now.
Yeah. I think you're right, especially right now when people don't have as much hope,
Mhm.
where so many things feel uncertain
Yeah,
on every level, where there's just so much bad news. And we always have a choice. We have a choice what we consume, to your point, and who we surround ourselves with. So we could choose to not listen to a lot of the bad news. I mean, it's still going to be bad news, whether we listen to it or not.
and we don't really have control over that outcome. So
Right.
are you really benefiting from inviting that knowledge? And it's not like your knowing it is going to change the outcome or the unfolding of it, right? So I like to
Yeah.
really focus on things that are elevating me, that I'm learning from, that are making me a better person or expanding my consciousness or creating opportunities for me to expand.
Yeah.
That's my goal. And I find that fear is very limiting and it really forces you into boxes where you're retreating and more contracting and your world becomes smaller because of the fears. So my goal is to expand and, raise my frequency and my light quotient and become more of a beacon and not be in those fear frequencies. And it's up to us to determine what is going to support that, right?
Exactly. Because we can always, we can choose to lean toward fear or we can choose to lean toward the light. And I think that when we are leaning toward the light, as you're suggesting, that's when those things happen, those things unfold, those, in these unexpected but amazing ways that keep us going, that remind us what's
Totally.
possible. And I'm with you. I have to just surround myself by really, really positive people. And there are tons of positive people out there. Even if the world is falling apart, there will always be a ton of positive people. It's not like you can't find them.
But I think a lot of it's our perspective too.
Yes.
Sometimes you have to zoom out and go, okay, this is really happening, but what's really happening in the world? a lot of times you have to have things that are kind of breaking down or deconstructing or crumbling so that, whether that's an institution or education or healthcare, whatever it is, sometimes you have to have the breakdown in order for us to level up and do better and create a better education system or healthcare system or political system or whatever it is that's
Yeah.
seemingly imploding. But people get really focused on that
Yeah.
destruction part, and they
I do.
get emotionally invested, and
Yeah.
it takes them down emotionally. And I'm like, you might want to look at your triggers, because those emotional triggers are actually, those are pointing you to look inward.
Yeah.
You need to examine what is triggering you and why, you know?
I do. I totally do. And yes, to having greater perspective. Yes, to being able to step back and trying to understand,
The bigger picture.
right, the bigger picture and whatever this event is in this larger context
Yes.
of the change that's underway in the world.
Yes. And it is a huge shift that we're going through. We're going through a huge paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing also one of the trends I'm noticing in the people around me, because I really believe that our circle and our human experience is the microcosm of the macrocosm, right? So I really have been noticing a lot of people around me are being forced to let go. And when I say let go, they're letting go of relationships that aren't aligned. People are getting divorced, or people are losing parents that are transitioning and passing on, or they're in careers and they're at a nexus point where they're like, I can't do this, is soul crushing.
Yeah.
So people are kind of being confronted with their truth, like their truth is rising around what's working and what's not working.
Yeah.
And it's forcing people to confront themselves and their truth in ways that can be ugly.
Yeah.
Maybe they're
Yeah.
drinking too much, or maybe they're in a soulless, loveless marriage, or maybe they're, whatever it is. But what I'm seeing is a lot of truth rising and people being really pushed to choose themselves and to start coming forward and speaking their truth and making decisions that are supporting them in their journey, versus always compromising and sacrificing for the other.
Yes.
You notice
are.
that?
I do. I do, Wendy. And it is interesting. I certainly think that the pandemic, the isolation, the time to really consider our lives has been
forced presence that people could avoid with busyness.
yes, right.
There
And
was a point to it,
right.
globally, there was a point
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah, it's true. And I certainly was part of that, being very busy, using busyness to avoid a lot of emotions.
Right.
And I
Then
think
you're
that
sitting at home like, oh, I'm feeling
yes.
this stuff come up. What is going on? Right.
Yeah, it's very, very true. And I still feel like I'm processing a lot of that.
I think a lot of people are. But you certainly have the tools. I can tell you have the tools, or you wouldn't be doing the work you're doing. You've clearly done a lot of inner work, or you wouldn't be able to come forward and be this beacon of light for other people.
Right.
You have to,
Yes.
you have to clear and heal and do your own inner work in order to help others, because we need to show up as healed versions of ourselves so that we can show the way for others. If you're unhealed, you can only show up from the level of your wounds. And people who are in that bandwidth or that harmonic tend to project and be more victims and be in more chaos and struggle and stuff. And that's not a place that I choose to be. An eternal student of myself, of life.
I love that.
Life is a great teacher. Life is a great teacher. It gives us opportunities to master ourselves in ways that we wouldn't have if we weren't paying attention, if we only thought that everything happening to us was to harm us and was against us. It's actually for us, even the suffering, even those challenging times.
Yeah,
We grow the most, you know?
I agree. And I do believe that people come into our lives for a reason,
Absolutely.
and lots of different reasons, often to teach us lessons. And sometimes it feels terrible and difficult, and we don't feel good about it.
Mhm.
And then, I mean, some people come to our lives into our lives for a brief time, other people forever. Like my best friend, we've been friends since we were 3. We met in nursery school. We've been
Are
friends
you
for,
serious?
yeah,
That
we've
is
been best
so
friends for 54 years,
that's amazing.
54 years. And
You guys
she's like the
know each
sister I
other.
never had.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And then there's other friends. You meet people and you're friends, but then something happens, you have a falling out, or you move away, or you will work friends, but you're connected through that. But then one of you leaves, and then you live far away, and you just don't maintain the
I
friendship. I mean,
wonder
for
if you've had
you
this
know,
experience, but I found that the healthier I've become, the more I trigger people. Like the healthier I've become emotionally and spiritually, and the more empowered that I've become. Because the more empowered you become, the stronger your boundaries. What you tolerate changes, right?
yes,
And the more you grow and ascend, and the higher perspective you have, it's like traveling up a mountain. So when you're at the base of the mountain, you have a very limited view and perspective.
yes,
But as you do your inner work and you keep spiraling up, you keep hitting this nexus point, and then now you have a broader perspective. And then you go higher and you have an even broader perspective. So I can kind of see now people's vulnerabilities or insecurities or their wounds or what's being projected. And it allows me to have more compassion, but it also allows me to make decisions to step back from certain friendships because they're just not serving me.
yes. And I have done some of that.
Yeah.
Even before the pandemic, where it just wasn't right. It wasn't what I needed. It
You
wasn't
feel it.
empowering.
You feel it, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want to be. It's interesting because the people who take the most from you are the most offended when you step back. The people who just suck you dry
Yeah.
energetically are the ones who are so outraged when you're like,
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore.
I
Or they're
know.
so triggered by your joy and your success and health and wellness and happiness. Uh, they're so annoyed that you're not, you know how misery loves company, right? They want you down here
Yeah, exactly.
with them, and you're like, see ya, I'm not doing
Sorry.
that.
Not anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But do you
Yeah.
find that, like I found, like the people who are the most offended by your boundaries are the ones who need them the most.
Which is kind of ironic, but yes.
It's so true, right?
Yeah, it's very, very true. And there's something that feels emancipating when we can recognize that someone is not serving us in our life, that it's not healthy. It could be anybody, whether it's a family member or a friend or a significant other, doesn't matter. But whoever that person is that shows up, and once you recognize, I mean, I had a situation with a friend who had been moved away a long time ago, came back, and it's just sort of a very demanding person.
Mm.
And I also found her to be sort of a bully. Like I had gone over to her house one time, and she ended up
Hmm.
bullying me. Like, here I am, an adult in my 50s, and I felt bullied.
Oh my
And
God.
I thought, this just isn't right.
Right.
And I just like I just can't be friends with her. I mean, she's a lovely person. And she's like a decent human being. This is not some terrible person.
Well, I
But
think this is my philosophy really, is we all are energetic beings and we hold these frequencies. And there's people who are in, like I say, AM radio, and they're down here. And
yeah,
maybe 20 years ago, you were an AM too, and you dived, right? But
yeah,
then you grew, and then you went to FM, and you
yes,
stayed in AM, and then now you're in satellite. And she moved back, and you're trying to
yeah,
balance, but you can't because your vibe is really high, and she's here, and there's nothing
yeah.
wrong with her being here, but she's not
No,
resonant with you anymore. You're
right.
here, and she's here. Not better or worse. You're in a different frequency. That's all. It's like you're in satellite radio, and she's in AM. there's no better or worse. It's just a different frequency
Yeah.
harmonics. You can't like even resonate or communicate.
Yeah.
Everything you say is going to be misinterpreted because there's this gap,
Yeah, exactly.
you know?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I find that to be so true. And I think that those are growth experiences, though. It feels uncomfortable when you're quote unquote breaking up with somebody, even when it's a friend. And in whatever way that unfolds, which is whether you tell them directly or you don't tell them, or you tell them in a letter, or you just
I
never
kind
say
of find that
anything.
people organically fall away that aren't aligned with me. It just
Yes.
organically happens. Like there's just less phone calls and interaction, and there's no effort. Because maybe I was the one making the effort all the time. Do you
I
remember
do.
that time of your life when you're like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
have to make this okay, even
Yeah.
though it feels awful. I need to make it okay, and you keep trying, and it keeps getting
Yes.
awful till you finally get to that point where you're like, no, I
Yeah.
don't think I want to do this anymore. But so you've had your podcast for 3 years now. Has it been three?
It will be 3 years in October. So
Congratulations.
or I guess technically when I did my teaser, it was September 29th of 2020. So I guess it's only going to be 2 years. What am I saying? I can't even
Woo.
count. Wendy,
But
I
it
can't
feels like
count.
three because you're
It
doing
feels like
great.
three. It
Oh,
feels like three. Oh my
congratulations.
God. It's only two. That's only going to be 2 years on
Awesome.
September
Well, you know
29th.
what? I think the fact that you're putting this great content out is awesome. It's liberating. It's inspiring for all of us that are listening. And I think also that we get to choose who we are. And we get to choose to step into our greatness and be bold and courageous and live life out loud on our terms. We get to choose that. And it's up to us to choose that. We can't just sit around waiting for the weather or the season or the right time. Because if not now, when?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, you're so right. I think that so many of us after the pandemic, when we recognize in a much more profound way how precious life is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we knew that intellectually. Things happen, people die, but that was a whole big awakening of like, uh-oh, like this is serious.
Yeah,
And I can't take anything for granted because you just don't know what could happen day to day.
right.
So I think that was for so many people, not everybody certainly, but a lot of people, a big awakening about our lives. The why not me? Why not now? Why shouldn't I do whatever that thing is that I want to do? And as we talk about a lot on the podcast, often we don't know the how. We have a why. Like
Right.
even with the podcast, I got my why is like I am meant to do this to inspire midlife and older women, but I didn't know the how. I didn't know how to do it, but
But you
to
figured it
your
out,
I
right?
figured it out. And to your point, when you put it out there and you make the intention, it's like then one day after I said it's going to be a podcast, I was listening to this podcast I really like called Side Hustle Pro. And the host said, oh, I'm going to be doing this training it's called Podcast Moguls, where you learn how to start a podcast.
Are you
So it's just,
kidding?
no,
How perfect was
you
that?
know how things happen, as you know, in this aligned way where, so I signed up, I went to the little webinar, and then I signed up for the training.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. I love it. Well, thank you so much for the work you're doing and for inspiring women to step into their beautiful light, their greatness, to having the courage to step forward and pivot. Because I think there's so many reasons why you you can talk yourself out of it, right? There's so
Oh,
many
yeah.
ways you can talk yourself out of it. Like, I'm too old. I don't think I can do it. I don't have the money. I mean, you can come up with a million ways to limit yourself and your growth.
Yeah,
But
exactly. And
you have
so,
to overcome that voice and follow your heart, because your heart is never going to lead you astray. Your heart is going to always pull you forward, always in the right direction. But you have to follow it and have the courage and have the excitement and the spark and not let anyone dim your enthusiasm, right?
exactly, exactly. So I think we all have to find our true north, whatever that is, however we find it.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get that inkling And I think we should go for it. We should surround ourselves, as you said earlier, Wendy, with people that believe in us, that lift us up, that are on our team, that are cheerleading for us and know that we can do it even on the days when we don't know if we can do it.
Yeah, and I think 100% that we need to say this, that the world needs you. There are so many people, and each of you has unique gifts, unique talents, unique things to offer society, friends, family, your circle. And the world needs you being you, not a version of you that somebody else wants you to be. The world needs your authentic voice and your presence and your light and your gifts and your joy, because every single person matters. You know, people feel insignificant, but each person matters on this planet. And we all energetically add our essence. A piece of us goes into the collective energetically. We're all contributing. And so we can all contribute and elevate the collective, or we can choose not to. But the world is a better place every time someone says yes to themselves, you know?
Exactly. I am right with you. Yes, yes, yes to all of that.
Yeah. So I'm
Thank
glad
you.
that you're doing your podcast to showcase women who are showing incredible bravery. And the name of Wendy's podcast is Reinvention Rebels. What platform are you on so people can follow you?
Every platform.
Every platform.
So you can find the
Google it. You'll
podcast.
find her. You'll
Yeah.
find her.
You can go to my website, reinventionrebels.com. But of course, you can find the podcast on all the podcast platforms. And you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter,
I
LinkedIn.
will put all her links in the comments and the final credits. But Wendy, it has been awesome connecting with you today. I enjoyed our conversation so much.
Me too. It's such a joy. Wendy, I am so grateful to you that you reached out to me. It was an honor to join you and be in conversation,
Oh,
not
thank
to
you.
mention with someone named Wendy, which is like the best part.
I know, right? It was meant to be. It was meant to
Meant to
be.
be, meant
And
to
to
be.
my
So thank you.
audience, yeah, thank you. To my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you guys are kind to yourselves, love yourselves, and I will talk to y'all later. Bye. We'll see you next time.